It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, the phone number, if you want to call or text, 870-275-9799. I want to introduce you to KrisAnne Hall. KrisAnne was born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. She began her career as a biochemist, a Russian linguist for the U.S. Army, a prosecutor for the state of Florida. She also practiced First Amendment law for a prominent national nonprofit law firm. She joins us now on the phone. KrisAnne, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. I'm just excited to be here.
I am too, and I want to thank the people that put us together, made this interview happen, because very excited. I've been watching a lot of your videos, listening to your discussions and your educational efforts of grassroots people trying to make a difference, trying to let them realize the benefits of our freedom and our individual rights and the Constitution of the United States. Can you tell us, share with our audience a little bit about how you got started in all of this?
Well, I went to law school and learned about the law. And while I was in law school, I came across some friends. I made some friends in the Federalist Society, began reading about the founders. I just happened across a book called here we go. I've already forgotten the name of the book. Oh, The Founding Brothers. And I read it. It was real short story, just a collection of short stories, and it was a real interesting, quick read. And it made me interested in the founders themselves. So I began reading their writing. And it sort of, doing that sparked the inner rebel in me, because I began to realize that what I was learning in law school had absolutely nothing to do with the Constitution itself. And as a matter of fact, as I took the constitutional law class that I had, I realized that much of what I was learning was actually contrary to the Constitution. And so it made me want to know. It made me want to know the truth. It sort of made me angry that we were supposedly learning the Constitution. We were going to be taking an oath to the Constitution, and yet we were learning really nothing about it. And it's sort of a long kind of journey, just picking it up here and there. And then I was a prosecutor. Then I went to work for the First Amendment law firm. And then after my sabbatical with the First Amendment nonprofit was over, I went back to the state attorney's office, where a new state attorney, a former coworker, had been elected. And I didn't realize that we had differing ideologies. And so when I live in a small rural community, and the people knew what I had, began to learn what I had been practicing in First Amendment law. So I was invited by the school board to come and teach them on how to have prayer before the school board meeting and not have the ACLU all over them. And I started teaching in a program we have here in Florida called Justice Teaching, where lawyers and judges go into the schools and teach on the First Amendment. And then I started speaking at local civics groups, like the Tea Party groups, and was invited to speak on the radio about the unconstitutionality of Obamacare. And apparently my boss heard that interview and started looking into my after-hours activities and decided that he didn't like them. And so he sent me an email and told me that I had to cease and desist all my association with right-wing fringe groups, those fifth graders that I was teaching. And I had to stop teaching the Constitution the way I was teaching it, because to teach that the Constitution, he said, required limited government was an ethical conflict of interest for anyone who worked for the government. And so I simply explained to him, I'm doing this on my own time. I'm not talking about my job. I'm not talking about you. This is all my stuff. And you don't have the authority or the right to tell me what I can and can do on my own time. And he simply said that he didn't care what my position was or what the First Amendment said. I could stop speaking, or I could work for him. And so, long story short, my husband and I prayed about it, and we realized that it was really worth something to take a stand. So I told him that he was not the author of my rights, and I wasn't going to trade them for his paycheck. And so he told me I had to quit, and I told him I'm not quitting, so he fired me. And that's what got me started independently. And so that was 8 years ago now. And for the last 7 years, we've taught about 265 classes in over 22 states every single year. I've written 6 books. I have a radio show that's globally heard and nationally syndicated. And we have Liberty First University now, which is online educational training, video format, learn at your own pace. And we are teaching people all over the globe about liberty, from ages 6 to 106.
Wow. That is fantastic. What an amazing story. And I am, I know you're out over the outrage of being fired and, the ignorance of people who are, our public officials. But I'm sure a lot of our listeners who've heard that for the first time are just thinking, wow, how in the world could he do that or think that way? But I think that it's really interesting in terms of, you've taken the ignorance of your former boss and you're now combating that ignorance by traveling the country and teaching people what the truth is, in the concepts of limited government that is there, to protect our rights, not try to take them away from us.
Right. And we have such a great time. We teach all kinds of people. We teach in, believe it or not, we are invited into public schools, high school, middle school. We teach at colleges. I've taught the legislators of 10 states, and every year we pick up a new state or two. I have a law enforcement course that I teach across the country. That several states sheriff's associations have approved my law enforcement class as continuing legal education for their officers, their deputies, and we're really, really excited. A lot of times people say, "Well, KrisAnne, what can you possibly be doing when you're teaching the choir?" But I don't always teach the choir. As a matter of fact, just last November, I taught an entire room full of Bernie Sanders supporters because since Trump has been in office, a whole new group of people want to learn about the Constitution. And frankly, we have found that the choir needs education on the Constitution and its applications and our history. Because although we have a large number of people who believe in the relevance of the Constitution, they'll say we carry our Constitution with us all the time. It's one thing to hold the document in your hand. It's another thing to read the document, but it's a whole other level to understand why it says what it says to the level that you can actually step up and be an advocate and a defender of the liberties of the people, and that's what we teach you to be.
Wow. We're talking with KrisAnne Hall. Up on her screen there that you see if you're watching online, it says that she's a constitutional attorney. She's actually, much more than that. If you look at her resume, it's very, very impressive. When you said that when you were in law school and then you started reading about the founders and you realized, wow, I'm going to law school and I'm not learning anything about the Constitution. I have a family member who's an attorney, and she said the same thing, that it's, it's just more about case law. It's not actually about, the Constitution and what it means. And so I'm wondering, in the whole educational process, let's take public education, for example. Our kids aren't really learning the truth in school. I mean, maybe some of them are, but by and large, this is information that it seems like is contraband right now to the national education system.
You know, you're absolutely right, and I will say that there are some that are learning because we have met teachers who take the time to teach, and like I said, who take the time to bring us in to teach. We have teachers say, KrisAnne, we need you to come into our schools because you can teach things we can't teach. And I think it's really, really an indictment on society that we don't do more to teach the Constitution and its relevance. I mean, we have an active effort in America, an overwhelming effort in America to teach our young people that the Constitution is not only irrelevant, but that the Constitution is actually a document of oppression to alienate entire generations, entire groups of American students. And so what we try to teach our teachers is that you actually have more latitude than what you believe you have. Most of our public school teachers don't realize that they have the ability to teach these things that are not in the textbooks, but they're bullied into believing that they don't. And if they don't have the support of their administration, then most schools allow their teachers to bring in outside speakers to teach. And if they're bringing in outside speakers to talk about global warming and environment and drug addiction, then they have to allow the teachers to bring in outside speakers to teach on the Constitution as well. And as a matter of fact, almost every single state in this union requires training on the Constitution at least, and I know this sounds crazy, but at least 1 week a month or 1 week a year, and that's through Constitution Week. And we've actually created and just released a Constitution Week DVD that is it's 6 short, less than 12-minute videos to teach one specific topic a day on the Constitution and allow the students to have real education on the Constitution, not revision or progress or Marxism. And we allow the students then to have discussion based on that truthful education. And people can get that Constitution Week DVD by going to libertyfirstuniversity.com and visiting the store that we have there. We have tons of educational DVDs, but I think that right now is probably our most popular.
Wow. I'm curious, KrisAnne, when you do travel the country and you talk to people in the grassroots, and you mentioned the choir, people say preaching to the choir or whatever, but there are people that misunderstand certain aspects. Is there any one reoccurring thing that people maybe say that's not quite right or quite accurate in the interpretation? I mean, what are you hearing out there from the grassroots?
Well, we teach the Constitution in a way that no one else teaches it, and I mean no one else. And so that gives us a certain little niche, and within that, we teach a lot of things that are just simply, and I'll just go forward and say, shocking to people to learn about the Constitution, about how easy it is to know and how relevant it is. But I think that there's probably amongst those who are supporters of the Constitution, I think probably the most often misunderstood is the Supremacy Clause, and the idea that the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution, which is Article 6, Clause 2, creates a federal government that is superior to the state in all matters. Politicians say it, law professors say it, that it's the Supremacy Clause that makes federal laws and regulations superior to all state law and state constitutions, when that is simply and completely not true. The purpose of the Supremacy Clause is not to make the federal government superior. The purpose of the Supremacy Clause is to make the Constitution supreme, to put the federal government under the Constitution, and to declare that anything that the federal government does outside the Constitution is not binding upon the states and is simply no law at all. And so all the regulations that are created that are unconstitutional, all of the agencies that are created that are unconstitutional, and all of the laws that are and federal acts that are created are unconstitutional, to the founders who wrote the document, those acts and laws and regulations simply have no legal effect at all. And then to compound that, we have also an error in our understanding of judicial supremacy, that the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of what is constitutional and not and what is not. And nothing could be simply further from the truth. That's actually a power that the Supreme Court invented for itself. The founders of our constitutional republic wanted the Supreme Court to be a judgment and guidance to the Constitution, and they don't have the authority to expand or sanction power beyond the grant of the Constitution any more than the legislature or the executive does.
I'm really glad that you said all that, because I completely agree. And I know anytime you mention the Supremacy Clause in its proper context, like you were just doing, what's the next thing people say? They say, well, jurisprudence, and our current standards. But then then you come back on top saying, but wait a second, jurisprudence. I mean, the Supreme Court. I mean, let's not forget the Supreme Court has ruled on things that we now believe today the complete opposite. When it comes to, you don't have constitutional rights because of the color of your skin. I mean, the Supreme Court, that's what they said at one time. So the idea that there's some, final arbiter is preposterous to me, and I think it's preposterous to you. Now, KrisAnne Hall, constitutional attorney. Now, you go to that website that you mentioned earlier, folks. It's libertyfirstuniversity.com. That's libertyfirstuniversity.com. I understand that you're going to be in Arkansas next year, early next year. I was told February, and so we're really excited that you're coming to the state of Arkansas, and hopefully we can get some legislators to attend some of your lectures, because I think they need to come. When you go to other states, do you meet with politicians and legislators?
Oh, absolutely. We have them voluntarily come to the meetings. And to the local meetings, we have people who organize for me to come and teach the legislators while they're in session. So while we're coming next year, if your legislators are in session, then we should also be scheduling some training for them in the House or the Senate. I have a course that I teach to the state legislators on the role and duty of the state and local government to uphold the Constitution based on their oath. And we go in and we teach state government. We will have a meeting and teach your county commissioners, your city councilmen. I would love to teach your school board. There are so many things that we could teach your school board about. And your local law enforcement. I mean, if your sheriff is nervous about having a constitutional attorney come teach his deputies, then you should have him contact us. We have so many great referrals. As a matter of fact, the deputies who come to our class are so excited about what they're learning that they write me afterwards and they say, KrisAnne, these are the things we are not learning in the academy that we need to be learning to protect our families, to protect our jobs, to protect us from lawsuits. We don't even teach in the academies how our officers need to keep them safe, keep themselves and their jobs secure from lawsuits based on constitutional issues. And so we just get great feedback from these classes. And it's really up to the people to make sure these things happen, because, I can solicit these classes to your local representatives and your sheriff, but they don't know me, and I really don't have any say in whether they're reelected or not. So it has to be a movement of the local people. And frankly, if anything is going to change in America with overgrown, bloated government, it has to start at the local level, because we really, especially at this point in our operation in America, have very, very little control over Washington. D.C., and we should stop having this unrealistic hope that one congressman or a president is going to fix all this wrong with Washington, D.C. You know, seriously, for the president, regardless whether you love him or hate him or think he's great or whatever, for the president to fix what's wrong with Washington, D.C., he has to cease being a president and start being a king. And then you've lost the fundamental protections and principles of our constitutional republic.
Wow. Yeah, I would agree with that. I certainly agree with getting engaged on the local level, and that's certainly what we've been trying to do here with Conduit News and reporting on the local intricacies of what goes on in state politics and all the way to the local level. And KrisAnne, it's been a pleasure to have you on. I would love to have you on again and continue this conversation and maybe dive into some deeper topics, but I so appreciate you taking time this morning. I appreciate your commitment to liberty and your educational efforts, and I just wish you the best.
Well, thank you so much, and I will truly look forward to coming back. We could be your regular constitutional current event consultant if you like.
Hey, that sounds like a plan. Let's do that. Let's do that. All right, thank you, KrisAnne.
Super, thank you.
KrisAnne Hall. Folks, you can check out some more at that store, libertyfirstuniversity.com, and then KrisAnneHall.com as well. And be sure to check out her radio show if you haven't heard of it before. And it's just, again, a pleasure to have her on the program. Folks, we do have to go to break, though. Joe's telling me back in just a moment.